is the Business Marketing and Finance Podcast, the podcast for all your business marketing and financial needs. Get insight from experienced professionals as they delve deep into their passions and share their knowledge each week with your host, Daryl James. Like to follow or learn more? You know what to do. Hit that subscribe button now.
Welcome everyone to this week's BMF podcast. This is our Ask an Expert session. I'm your host, Daryl James, and my next guest has spent the last 13 years leading global marketing teams for big brands such as Nike, Pokerstars and Havas Media. Head of Global Fan Engagement at Chelsea Football Club, welcome Adam Field to the Business Marketing Finance Podcast.
Hi.
Hi, welcome Adam, welcome. Adam, can you tell us a bit about your journey, what it was like growing up and how you made the turning point to being the man who you are today?
Sure. So I've grown up in Northwest London my whole life, and kind of one of four boys, and kind of living in a world where I was always driven by being creative and being curious around that creativity. And I had a very artistic background, and when I was younger, my academic progression probably wasn't as fast to develop as my creative side. Mm-hmm. So I found myself more often than not excelling a lot more at things like sport and music and art. Okay. And art is actually where I started to focus a lot of my education and further career educational development outside of school. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to kind of channel the right skills that I believed I had, and not worry as much around how I was going to apply my more traditional academic background. Yeah. And so I really went down the route of kind of art design and studied at the Middlesex University just after leaving school, where I did an art foundation course, which was probably very different to what I should have done, but was the best in between gap between school and university.
Yeah.
And that was very hands-on creative. So that wasn't step back, create concepts and ideas. That was kind of get the paintbrush and start being a bit hands-on. Yeah. But then I managed to get into the University of the Arts in London, which was a kind of a group of universities that I had looked at for quite a few years because of their, they have the London College of Fashion and then the London College of Art, and they really embody a very the highest level of kind of creative development. And so I got into the London College of Communication, which was kind of the courses that university did was much more around the stepping back and being as much hands-on as much as it was being a little bit more thought driven and strategic. So I did a 3-year course in graphic media design for advertising. And then on the back of doing that, at the back of finishing that, I still wasn't convinced about the creative side of what I was doing, and I was more interested in the business side of it. Yeah. So I managed to get myself onto an internship program at Saatchi, which is kind of one of the oldest and most I think well-known advertising agencies in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was an 8-week summer program that was. There was about 14 interns that took part in it. And the idea was simply that you would embed yourself within one of the account teams, looking after one of the brands that they worked for. Yeah. And you would just observe and learn what was going on. I think I was a bit lucky because I ended up working on the Dr. Martens business, of which there wasn't a huge team. So I was actually probably doing a lot more than most other interns were doing at the time, because they needed the support. So really very quickly eliminated a few things from my head that I was going to focus on for a career. So I definitely knew I didn't want to be a creative, like a full-on a creative copywriter or art director, based on what I observed in that internship. I didn't think the payoff was what I was looking for in a career.
Sure.
What I really enjoyed was the strategy side of things, the account management side of things, and I really thrived in that environment where you had to kind of create not just a creative idea, but you had to think about and plan for the journey, the messaging, the layout of the campaigns, how you would take a brief from a client, interpret that brief, think about the execution, integrate an idea, and then launch it into the market. And there was this whole world that I was really fascinated by. I actually, they did at the end of the internship program, they created a competition for all of the interns to basically pitch an idea to the CEO and the leadership team at Saatchi & Saatchi.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, you worked in teams and you had 2 weeks. And it was well known in the agency that if you won that competition, you were given a job at the end of it. It was like a hidden truth that was very, very well spoken of. Yeah. So I kind of thrived, with that as a brief. And there was a brief that was specifically set, which everyone had to address. It wasn't like go off and create random ideas. It was around, I think it was around employee engagement. It was something around that theme.
Yeah.
And I ended up, myself and my partner, we ended up winning.
Nice.
And so there I was at the end of the internship program. We'd just been given the bottle of champagne from the CEO, and the internship was over. And I kind of, I kind of did my Conor McGregor walk down the corridor.
Yeah.
Basically almost to the doors of HR, ready to knock on and say, right, when do I start?
Yeah.
And they were kind of, well, you don't start, there isn't a contract for you. So it was kind of a hit in the face where you thought that you were going to be given an opportunity to actually take a full-time job.
Yeah.
And then you're basically being told no.
Yeah.
So that was kind of hard. And I ended up spending about 3 months from that moment to getting actually a full-time job, doing a lot of random things. Like I would constantly be trying to get in front of the right people at the right agencies. I did some work experience at a couple of very, very small below the line agencies, of which the work was not exciting at all. It didn't really give me any sense of encouragement for my future career, but it allowed me just to kind of put a CV together.
Yeah.
And then I got I was working with a recruiter, and they called me up one day and they said, have you heard of Ogilvy? And I obviously had heard of Ogilvy as another well-established advertising agency. I knew exactly who they were. And they said to me that they had set up a new division within Ogilvy, which was a digital marketing part of the business. And this was back in 2006. So it was very early on in the world of digital. And when it comes to agencies, for sure. And she said to me, there's a job going in the digital team. And she explained the job. And I said to her, listen, I have absolutely no idea of anything that you are talking to me about in this job spec. You know, the job spec essentially was like reading a foreign language. It was very technical and very much in a world that I didn't have any experience in, nor did I have any interest in. And she said to me, just go and meet the guy that's running the team. He's an American guy, very, very smart guy. And you lose nothing by going and meeting him. And so I said I'd take the meeting, and I met with him, and we were talking and about the job, and I held my hands up and I said, listen, I just need to be really honest with you. I have no idea about this job in terms of the abilities for me to be able to do it, because I'm not technical. And I said, but I'm a fast learner and I'm willing to work hard to learn. But I need to be black and white with you and tell you that I probably lack the skills that you are looking for in someone doing this job. And anyway, he gave me a shot, and he said, we'll teach you. And so that kick-started my career in marketing at a time when probably I wasn't going to head down that path. Because digital marketing at that time, I didn't have the expertise. So I didn't really add value to any digital business because I hadn't been in that world at all. But I quickly learned it. Which was the good thing. I think it was important that I was to kind of learn and fail quite fast. It was an extremely boring job. It was me mostly spending my days in an Excel spreadsheet. But it taught me the intricacies and the foundations of digital media buying, planning and buying, which later down the years, I look back on and I couldn't be more grateful that I did that role.
Yeah.
At the time, I couldn't think of anything worse because it was, I wasn't utilizing any creativity, which is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it was still working for a well-established advertising agency that would look great on my CV. So I did it. And after about 6 to 8 months, I turned around to my boss and I said, listen, you need to know that I don't think I can do this for much longer because I'm not leveraging the creativity that I need to, and I'm feeling like I'm not progressing. And he totally understood. And to be honest, Ogilvy were great. They looked at opportunities that I could move into within the agency.
Yeah.
And they were great at trying to help me navigate that world. At the same time, I was reading Marketing Week, the publication, and I read an article that Facebook were setting up an office in the UK.
Yeah.
And there was two people actually that were named in that article who were being sent from Palo Alto in the US to come and set the office up. And I was on Facebook at the time because I had a lot of American friends and they were using it. So I was probably an early adopter in the UK, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I went on Facebook and I found the two guys that were referenced in the article and I sent them both a message. And I just said, hi guys, you know, I read an article you guys are looking to set up in the UK. I'd love to meet with you. This is who I am, etc., etc. Anyway, like 2 days later, I got an email back saying, hey, you know, thanks for your message. Would be great to meet up when we're in London. We'll be there. You know, we'll be there in the next kind of month. So let's arrange to meet up. And I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. I didn't expect just to send a random message to eventually get there. And anyway, about a month later, I got back in touch with them as they asked, and I went to meet one of the two people that were setting up the office. And I, we had a coffee. And they explained to me the situation, and they were saying to me that it's a brand new office. They don't really have anything set up yet. They are kind of looking for different people, but they weren't really sure. Most of the people they were looking for were salespeople. They did have a potential job, but they didn't really know what that job was going to be yet, but that I should keep in touch with them. Within about 3 months, I basically got offered a job there. Just through that initial message that I had sent, on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I went in as a sales planner. Basically, my job was to help the sales guys sell the advertising solutions that Facebook offered into the agencies and into brands directly. And then once those deals were created, I was then responsible for managing the process in the back end.
Wow. So what year was this? I know
2007.
Okay, so right in, I suppose, Facebook's infancy, really.
Yeah, really in their infancy.
Yeah.
But so I was kind of the middleman, really. I wasn't responsible for selling anything, but I was working with all of the sales team as they were selling to ensure that what they were selling we could actually deliver based on inventory and based on the spends that the budgets they had. Sure. And then in the back end, working with the guys in Palo Alto in the US to execute and deliver on those plans. So it was a very different world for me because I was still in the media space, but I was now on the publishing side. So I'd gone from the agency space where I was the intermediary between the publishers and the client. I was now the publisher, working with the agencies. And again, it was an amazing learning curve. And I always tell people now, when like students and graduates who ask me for advice, I always say to them, spend time figuring out what you want to do. You're never going to just go into your first job and that'll be it. You're never going to nail it first time round. You need to do some discovery to better understand the things that you like and the things that you don't like, to be informing yourself, your future self, on where you should end up. Because if you take a career of, let's say, 30 years, there is nothing bad about saying for the first 5 years, you basically made a lot of mistakes and tried to figure out the right path to take. And then from those 5 years onwards, or from those 7-8 years onwards, you started to really invest longer periods of your career or your years into businesses where you can become a real valuable asset to them.
Very true. Yeah.
So I got to some time at Facebook and I was like, I'm not enjoying this. It was a sales environment that I wasn't being creative. I was selling, and I wasn't even the part of the sales team. So I was watching all of these sales guys getting all of these commissions and all of these bonus structures. And I was basically the junior guy in the room, basically doing all of the hard work at the end of it.
Yeah.
And also what I thought at the time, which was restricting me, was I could see that at the time MySpace was still a thing, but it wasn't as big as Facebook. Yeah. Twitter was growing. Yeah. YouTube was becoming a lot bigger. Yeah. And I realized that actually, if I wanted to be a well-rounded professional in this marketing space, I needed to better understand the other platforms, because I didn't understand any of the other platforms at all. So I kind of made decision to join a startup based in Shoreditch, who I'd met while I was at Facebook, and they were a social media technology business. Yeah, they did all of the media parts, but they also did the creative bits, which I was really interested in. So I jumped into more of a broader social media business, which I think was really beneficial for me, because I started learning about different social properties. I learned about how you integrate a brand idea with a media plan behind it. Sure. I learned the world of a startup in its truest form, in terms of, having to generate the right revenues in order for the business to grow year on year. So I did that, and then like a lot of startups, you end up with the power struggle between the owners and then the management team. And I think there was a bit of a breakdown of communication and a bit of a misalignment on the direction that both I wanted to go in and the founders wanted to go in. Yeah. So at the same time, I was approached by a media agency, Havas Media. They were about to hire their first ever head of social media for the agency. Oh, and I got put in touch with Paul Frampton, who was their MD at the time. And I read about them. They were kind of like a medium to small agency with big clients like the BBC. And they were aspiring to be a bit more of the bigger agency in the media world. So met Paul for a coffee one day, and the moment I met him, I was like, this is what I want to do. And within a few weeks, they offered me the job of head of social. Which was going back into an agency, which is more of a traditional agency, which excited me because I was taking more of a leadership role. This was only back in 2009, so it was still early in my career, but still giving me a platform. So it gave me exposure in the media. So my name started to appear in, opinion pieces, and I was going to events and stuff, which was great for building my brand. Sure. But it was also great because I had a blank piece of paper, and really, funnily enough, every job I've taken since then, I've always had that blank piece of paper to work from, which has been fantastic. Yeah, it's really and so I jumped into Havas, and I had some really clear objectives. One of the objectives was, how do you educate our clients better on social media, what to do, what not to do? How do you then sell services into those clients so that we can generate incremental revenue on top of what they already pay us? And then how do we become an industry leader as an agency in delivering these best-in-class social media campaigns and integrating that social media within the broader media planning strategies that the agency was doing? So I went in, I created a business model and a strategy, started to go in to meet the clients that the agency had, started to then grow a team. And then we started to implement technology to help the agency. So I utilized some of my experience over the previous 3 years, and started to bring in some proprietary technology that we as Havas could use to sell into our clients at a premium cost that would allow us to scale some of the work that we were doing. And we were the first agency to So we created really good media coverage and exposure by being the first agency to embed that level of technology into the business. And then we also just started to create some really good work that was using Facebook and Twitter and YouTube as platforms at the time to engage with the audiences and the customer base of some of these brands.
Yeah.
And that was fantastic. And we were doing a really good job of that.
Yeah.
And then I went to an event about a year and a half into my time there. I went into an event that I was invited to, and I got introduced to a recruiter. And she was asking me, am I enjoying Havas? And I was like, yeah, loving it. And she said to me, if you could go and work in any two companies, which companies would you work?
Yeah.
And I said, I would love to, in the future, I said, I'd love to work in sports and I'd love to work in poker or gaming, because they're two big passions of mine. Anyway, about 6 weeks later, I get a call from her.
Yeah.
And she said, remember that conversation we had? I think I've got a dream job for you. And I was a bit dubious as to what she was really referring to. And she said, Pokerstars are hiring for a global head of social media.
Yeah.
And I think you'd be great. And I said, well, first of all, I'm a huge advocate of that brand.
Yeah.
I'm a customer myself, so I knew the brand well.
Yeah.
And I know the space quite well. And the job itself was extremely appealing based on the scale of the role and the size of the business. And she said to me, but just to warn you, the guy that's hiring the job has met 7 or 8 people so far and none of them have been right. And so I thought, okay, well, this is just going to go one way, which was not going to go well. And I met the guy that was then going to be my boss. And it was a difficult interview. It was probably one of the hardest interviews I've ever had, because Pokerstars and gaming companies are driven very much on acquisition and retention cycles. And they make their money based on the lifetime value, customer value. Yeah. So every pound that you spend needs to have a certain return for the business model to work. Yeah. So I was being grilled quite hard on what I've done to show that I have worked in that space, and also some ideas of what I would do if I was in the job. Now, truth be told, I actually had no experience at all in that world. I'd never worked in an acquisition environment before. So all I could really do was show him that I had leadership qualities, and I had a hunger to kind of learn and develop as I was doing the job. And so they ended up offering me the job, which was great. And it was probably one of the most interesting, exciting and challenging jobs I've ever been in, because for the first time I was given a 7-figure budget that I had to control, which I'd never been given before. And I had to become very familiar with financial planning and business modeling. And I had to be quite shrewd in how I engaged with media partners, publishers, content creators, and everything like that, because I had to show on a monthly basis that the money I was spending was converting new customers to the product, and the customers that we were acquiring were staying. So it was a really tough challenge. And then I had responsibility for 25 markets around the world, and I had quite a large team that were all scattered in the countries that were reporting into me. So I had the added responsibility of having to navigate the matrix that is, that world of, dealing with global audiences, to time zones, languages, different gaming laws in different markets. So probably one of the biggest learning curves in terms of as a marketeer. But I loved the product at the heart of it. So I couldn't not love it every single day, because it was just a place that I was excited to go to work. And, made some great changes. We implemented a much cleaner social channel strategy. So we eliminated a lot of we reduced the amount of accounts we had. We worked much harder on how we engage with our fan base. We created much more profitable marketing campaigns that yielded a higher return for us. So we did some small things that made a big difference. And then I started hiring a team. and started hiring people that were coming from very different backgrounds that didn't necessarily come from poker, but came from more, just a different skill sets. And just genuinely had an amazing time there. And honestly feel like if it wasn't for the call that I received one day from Nike, I would still be at Pokerstars today because of my love for the product. But after about 2 years, I get a call from a recruiter at Nike, and they were explaining to me that they were looking for someone to come in and head up their social media across Europe. And they'd got my name from someone internally at the business. And it was kind of like one of those moments that you kind of hold your breath and you think, is this real? Nike being one of the biggest sports brands, or biggest brands, let alone in sports, in the world. And from a marketing point of view, very aspirational as a purpose-driven business. So I took the call. I went to Amsterdam to meet the team. I met some of the global guys, and I met with a variety of different leaders within the business, ranging from people that would be my peers to people that would be, five layers above me in the org chart. And meeting everyone, it was very clear and obvious that the Nike as a business, a brand, and as a culture would be a really good fit for me, both personally and professionally. And I had to make a really tough call to walk away from Pokerstars. I actually took a pay cut to go to Nike, funnily enough. But I knew that that kind of sacrifice was almost worth it, knowing what I would get for it long term.
Eventually will pay off, definitely.
And it was a really hard decision, because I think there are times in your career where you get bored and frustrated and you're not being challenged, and therefore you need to leave because you need to find something that's going to keep you engaged. Then there are times when you're actually in a good place, but something better comes along that is very hard to say no to. And I think this was that moment. And so packed up my bags, packed the poker chips away, and headed to Holland to spend 4 years working at Nike.
Wow. A really interesting experience for you. I mean, a new world over in Holland, definitely.
It's thankfully it's culturally very similar to London in a lot of ways. But I still felt that it was good for me to get a completely different experience from a new environment that was going to again help to develop my career. And I wasn't even 30 by this stage, so to me, to have still worked for some of those companies and to have the opportunity at that age to kind of go into a company, I felt very privileged and kind of humbled. And I think I had the best 4 years of my life at Nike. I mean, I spent the first probably year and a half on a plane every single week, going to new places, meeting the teams, attending events, meeting the consumers, you get in the thick of it when you're there. And that was unbelievable, and I absolutely loved that. And my time at Nike was split into two. The first year was basically setting up a social media best practice center of excellence division. Which was around taking what the global framework on the structure was, which had been put in place, and localizing that for a European audience. And at the same time, then structuring our agency partners to ensure that we are getting the best out of them, changing the strategy for the markets in Western Europe. So I was responsible for 7 markets in Western Europe, and making sure that they all were clear and understood on the really clear deliverables and expectations and objectives that we wanted to strive for. So those were things like previously when I came in and I observed and I did an audit, I noticed that we didn't have any KPIs or expectations on how we engaged with our fans through social media, or the quality of the content that we were posting through social media, or or how often we were engaging, and the kind of quality of that engagement. So we created some very basic frameworks for how we wanted to engage with our fans.
Sure.
And that was based on, ensuring that we responded to 100% of relevant comments from our fan base, making sure that we responded within 1 hour, and making sure that we had benchmarks of performance on reach and engagement of all the content that we created for that channel. So we re-established the expectations and then set up our teams to be able to deliver against that. I was then asked to go to Portland to be part of the World Cup team, the kind of central, the team that were looking after the World Cup as a business. And then I spent basically 4 weeks over there. Coming back, I sat down with my boss and I said to her that I wanted to move into a football role and I wanted a broader remit. And basically we kind of wrote the job together. If the job didn't exist, we wrote it together, so which was great. And we, within about 3 to 6 months, I transitioned into kind of a marketing director for digital brand football across EMEA. So my remit's changed then from this social media role to a digital role. So I was responsible for the complete digital ecosystem of web, app, CRM, membership, social media, etc., etc. So my brief became around gearing ourselves up for the Euros in France the year later, in 2016. So I had to then build a team from scratch, restructure agency partners, and create the strategy for how we were going to own Paris and own France throughout the Euros to dominate as a brand around a key sporting moment. So obviously huge job. I loved it because I'm a huge football fan myself, and allowed me to kind of again go into a new area that I'd probably never been into in that pure digital space that I needed on my as part of my arsenal, so that I could kind of flex some of the things that I'd never flexed before around my knowledge of performance media, understanding user journeys and experiences from an e-commerce point of view, and understanding the role of CRM and email marketing and all of those elements that I think previously I'd observed, but I'd never been the guy that was leading the point of view from.
Sure.
So go on.
No, I was just going to say, at this point, did you have any mentors?
I didn't. I mean, my mentors, luckily, were probably people that were my bosses. So James Sandoval, who was my first boss at Ogilvy, has always been a mentor to me, and I've always gone to him. Every single job I've taken, pretty much, I've always had his input and his thoughts on, because he's a very good judge of character and of direction. So I've always had him, although never in an official capacity, more of an informal capacity. I've then always had just good leaders around me that I've always been able to kind of go to whenever I've needed them. Not necessarily having one person that's always been my, in inverted commas, mentor, but people that I trust that know me well enough to guide me on advice. And I met some of them at Nike. So Musa Tariq, who's currently at Airbnb Experiences as head of marketing, he's a very good friend of mine, and I him and I will always chat about these things whenever I need some words or some feedback. As the same as my boss at my actual boss at Nike for the majority of my time, Dorinda Ross, who's now the VP of Digital Global at Nike, and she was always a good soundboard for the thing. So I probably had 2 or 3 people that I've always gone to, that I've gathered them over time versus necessarily having them from the beginning. Sure.
No, definitely.
And then towards the end of 2016, I was actually weighing up some options in my mind as to what my next steps were at Nike. I then had a call from a headhunter in the UK who I knew, who asked me if I'd be interested in having a meeting with Bruce Buck and Marina, who's one of the company directors at Chelsea. Very speculative, like very much a case of they're looking at their marketing organization and would you be interested in having a conversation with them? Anyway, I was thinking about, at this point, my father was quite sick, and I was looking at at some point moving back to the UK anyway, to be closer to my family.
Yeah.
And the timing was interesting. So I flew back to London and I met with Bruce and Marina, and we had a great chat about my background, but also about the way that Chelsea were looking at marketing. And they were going through kind of almost a reset of where they thought marketing needed to shift in the future.
Yeah.
I ended up going back about 4 times in the space of 2 months to meet with different people at Chelsea. We had a lot of conversations. It was clear that they were looking at bringing in a marketing director.
Yeah.
But they were also looking to bring in heads of department under that director. So it was unclear as to what our conversations were really about, but I knew that they were looking at the structure of their marketing organization moving forward. In early January 2017, my father sadly passed away, and I kind of had a moment of, a kind of a light bulb moment where I said, I need to get back to London. Like, I can't be in Amsterdam anymore.
Yeah.
So Nike were amazing, and not only did they offer me time off to, spend time with the family and grieve, they also offered me opportunities to kind of move into the London office and kind of transition. The problem was some of the things when you transition from a geo office into a local office, your job changes quite dramatically, and I wasn't sure if it was the right thing for me. So I actually took the opportunity to just take some time off.
Okay.
And in the end of February and early March, I basically left Nike, came back to London, moved in with my mum, and decided to start thinking about, buying a property, doing a bit of thinking about like my next step.
Yeah.
And I knew that Chelsea were in the background still, although it had been a few months that we kind of had lost contact, and actually just enjoy some time off. So I took March and April off.
Yeah.
Chelsea at the time had come back to me and told me that they just appointed this marketing director and that they wouldn't be doing any more appointments until that person was in the business in May.
Okay.
So I kind of knew that, okay, well, if anything's going to happen with Chelsea, it's not going to happen until the summer. So I'll just kind of get on with my own thing, and then whatever happens will happen. I then got approached about some consulting work for a couple of startups, and I just thought, you know what, it will be something completely different. I'll do some of this work in the startup space, and see what comes of it. So I met some really cool startups in the gaming and sports world, and started doing just 2 days a week, 3 days a week, just helping consult on their marketing strategy. And it was more to kind of get me back into a routine of marketing and getting back into the industry as opposed to it being like a new career path. And then in early July, I'd only been doing the consultancy for about 2 months, not even that. And then at the beginning of July, I get a call from that headhunter again who said, Chelsea now have a job for you and they want you like this week.
Wow.
So it was kind of mad. I went in and met the marketing director, and basically within a week he offered me a job. Nice. And it was a job that felt right for me for lots of reasons. It felt right for me because it was still allowing me to utilize a lot of the skills that I'd kind of amassed over the past 13 years or 11 years at that point. It gave me a bigger team to work with that I hadn't had before. So I had about 18 people in the team, both in Singapore and in London. And it allowed me to have that blank piece of paper again, which I've always had in jobs, where I was able to create a strategy, align the business to that strategy, build the team around it. And that was it's like the entrepreneur in me was always excited about something like that.
Sure.
And so middle of July, started at Chelsea, and I've been there now since July 2017.
Nice. So can you tell me a little bit more about your role currently at Chelsea FC?
Yeah, so my title is Head of Global Fan Engagement. My role is it kind of covers quite a broad range of things. It covers everything from how we take our brand into markets such as the US, China, Asia, and India.
Yeah.
So it's our go-to-market strategy and how we grow our fan base and how we grow our brand in those markets. And that encompasses everything to do with marketing. So anything from an event, an activation, digital marketing, to social media, on the ground activations, partnerships, influencers, and everything in between.
Sure.
Then I have a brand marketing team that look after what do we want to tell, what are the stories that we want to tell that help to create an emotional and kind of in some instances physical connection with us as a brand, and that based on the positioning that we have as a brand and as a sports brand, and then how we create the narratives that get people to buy into that. And that's about telling the stories about our players, our history and heritage, our products that we have, our partnerships, and various other things like community initiatives. So I have a brand marketing team that focus on how we tell those stories. And then I have a kind of team that focuses on all of the things around our supporters, and as in like our hardcore fans and supporters, and the events and experiences we do around them. So things like match day experiences, when we take the team on pre-season tours, our loyalty and CRM programs that we offer for anyone that joins the club along that journey. So it's quite a broad, and then our junior proposition as well for kids. So it's quite a broad. It covers quite a lot of the business, which is what's exciting. And ultimately, the job of the team is to grow the appeal of the brand, take that brand into new markets, to help grow the fan base of the club. And by growing the fan base of the club, when we look to monetize that audience, we will then hopefully help generate new revenues into the business that can be used to help on-pitch success.
Yeah, sure. Now, some of the players, I'm sure, have their own social accounts, and I'm guessing that your risk management must be like extensive. But how important are celebrities and influencers to your overall strategy?
They're important, but we don't rely on it. So players definitely add a huge voice and authority to what we're trying to do. And most fans will navigate towards players more than they will do the clubs themselves. So getting on the side of the right side of the players and helping to build their personal brands is critical in talking to new audiences. Influencers is a tricky one, because the world is littered with bad examples of influencers and good examples. We try to only work with true fans of the club that we know are real fans and not fake fans. And we try to build authentic relationships with them that allow us to then invest in the partnership that we have. So I won't necessarily pay an influencer, but I will give them 2 tickets to a game of their choice. And I will allow them to go pitch side and meet, watch the warm up and meet the players. And that exchange of value for me is much more important than it is about a commercial, tangible fee that they want or their agents want. So we're trying to get the balance right with influencers. Obviously, with players, we don't have that as much. With players, our struggle is how do we prove to them that we're trying to do stuff that is going to appeal to them as well as appeal to the club. So we have a blend of all of both of those worlds. But we just don't rely on it.
Of course. What are the current hurdles that you've faced with working with the Chelsea FC and pushing the brand and getting fans to engage more and things like that?
I think the biggest challenges we've had is that we're working within a world where football is quite traditional, and a lot of the people that work in football clubs have been around for a long time, and they don't like to see change. So we have tried a lot of new initiatives, and at first a lot of the business would push back on us because they don't believe it's either the right thing to do, or they don't believe it's the thing that fans want from us. So one of the things that I had to do was bring in talent from a lot of different kinds of backgrounds. So I hired people from Tesco, from Adidas, from Disney, so from places that are very different to football clubs, to try and build in a new way of thinking, to try and prove and show the more established kind of hierarchy of the business that are quite traditional, that there is a new way that we can do things, and it has incremental benefits for us. And that's probably been the biggest hurdle.
Okay. Now, you help Chelsea FC build their brand. How do you yourself build your own brand, your personal brand?
I think that's a tricky one. There's a lot of people that probably don't want to build their personal brand for lots of different reasons. I think I think early on in my career, I was in spaces where I was forced to go to a lot of events and sit on panels and give opinion pieces for articles and points of view on product launches, and that helped me in the early days build my personal brand. Nowadays I use LinkedIn, and I would do things like this and podcasts and interviews and fireside chats at some events. And it's really about, to me, it's probably saying less and letting the work do itself. So I try and find the balance myself of helping the teams that I've got, give them the ability and set them up for us doing brilliant work, and then helping to share that work amongst my audiences and audiences in the media that allow us to then attach our names to that work. That in itself, I think, helps create your brand, because there's no better way of showing your brand than the work you do. I think it's the truest reflection of who you are as a person, which is the output that you create. And then alongside that, if I can do certain pieces myself that are opinion pieces or things like this podcast, it just allows me to go a little bit deeper on some discussion points or kind of ideas and initiatives that we've done, or strategies that we're working towards, that allow me to then give people a better understanding of what I'm about, instead of being on Twitter all day. Because I don't really tweet at all. I'm a passive user of the platform, mostly because I don't really have the time to sit there and think about things to tweet all day long, and mostly because I'm not sure it's the most productive platform for creating that personal brand. Whereas I think platforms like LinkedIn, but also new mediums like podcasts and audio, provide a much richer platform to give real thought pieces and point of view. So I'm trying to find that balance myself. I get asked to go to events often and sit on panels or do presentations, and often I say no, because I don't feel like it's the right thing for me in terms of what it will add to either to Chelsea as a club in terms of what we're trying to do, or to me as an individual, and kind of positioning myself. But it's not an easy path to navigate when you're trying to build your personal brand. But I think less is more, for sure.
Now, speaking on the various platforms, I know that you currently distribute content in 12 languages on many platforms. What are the top 3 platforms you think businesses should focus on in the next year, and why?
It depends on the business, because, I could sit here and talk about a financial services business, and I would never say TikTok is the platform for them.
True.
Don't think that it would make much sense. But I think modern consumer brands, TikTok as a platform is fast becoming, and it is today, one of the most important platforms for brands to take that pay attention on. We as Chelsea launched on the Chinese version of TikTok about a year ago. We have about 1.5 million fans on that platform, and we know the importance of short form video content to our demographic. But like I said, a financial services brand or a B2B brand probably wouldn't find that a very smart move at all. But I do think that important platforms, I think YouTube as a platform is important because of the importance of video. And because of the rise of OTT platforms and the constant evolution of the on-demand video service. So brands that are looking to engage with their audiences in new ways, video as a medium and as a lean back format, YouTube will provide a platform that I think most brands can do a lot more with if they know how to. So I think definitely YouTube, depending on the right brand, for sure. TikTok, definitely. And what else? I think Instagram, but thinking about Instagram not through the lens of just posting imagery. I actually think the evolution of Instagram stories as a product is a really interesting format that I think, when I look at the success we get at Chelsea through doing Instagram stories, it far outperforms a lot of the other formats that we have as a brand. And I think that would probably be accurate for a lot of other brands as well, because it allows you to tap into a very modern day consumer experience, which is, I want things fast. I don't, I want things that are going to grab my attention, that keep me engaged, and that give me something back. And so there's probably a lot of value in that. So I'd probably say that.
Yeah, yeah. Now, are there any collaborations between sport and music that you would like to see within the next, 8 months to a year?
Well, we've actually done quite a lot with Sony Music. We had a partnership with Sony over the last 2 years, and we did a lot of work with artists like Steve Aoki, Abraham Mateo, MK. So we've actually done some really nice stuff, and we've dabbled in that space now, which we're excited about. We actually we did a partnership with Jamal Edwards and Capo Lee, and they created a song and called Style and Swag, and it was in collaboration with the kit launches that we had this season. So we've looked into that space, and we're starting to think about how we go further in it. Yeah. But I think there will continue to be more examples of those collaborations between artists and players. Maybe not clubs, but players for sure. Because there's a truth that a lot of players think they're artists, and a lot of artists want to be footballers. So there's something that you can really play up on in that world. So I think you'll see a lot more of it, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of that is coming from the likes of PSG and their partnership with Jordan, and looking at areas where there's culturally a good connection with the music scene. Yeah.
No, that sounds really, really, really good. I agree with that, actually. I think that when it comes to the collaboration between the two, you've got a lot of fans that engage with music on a whole new level, and it only makes sense to fuse it with sport. Now, what new technology or software are you most excited about right now?
What new technology or software? It's a good question. I think I've always been fascinated by voice tech and the way that the evolution. I contributed towards a report that Copper 90 did around the modern football fan last year, and one of the things I talked about was the rights that Amazon Prime have bought for this season in the Premier League over Christmas. And one of the things I talked about was how they can use their products such as Alexa to think about how consumers engage with the viewing experience over Amazon Prime, but through voice-enabled technology. And I believe it's a space that people are looking at, but no one's really brave enough to invest huge amounts of money into creating experiences for the home or for the phone that allow the voice tech to truly be tested in line with products and services. But I believe that if Amazon are thinking around their ecosystem of products, where you've got Amazon Prime and you've got an Echo voice activated system in your home, think about the personalization that you could, or the experience that you could have by integrating both of those products together. I think it could change football, but I'm not sure if we're at that stage right now. But if I look to a year's time, I can imagine that will be something that is much more thought about in how we as consumers engage with products and services, if not through the viewing experience itself.
Yeah, no, sure, definitely. Now, in your own opinion, what is the best way to launch an unusual product or service?
An unusual product or service. Well, it would really depend what it is and who your target consumer is, really. I think nowadays people have got to be smart or smarter with their investments than ever before. And the reason I say that is because we live in a world where we have the best technology in terms of online data and thinking about how we think about programmatic media in order to how we engage with potential customers through digital and social platforms. So I would, regardless of the product being quirky or not, I would be thinking about how to be smart and savvy with my media budgets on those platforms, leveraging the power of the audience data that is available to be able to get in front of the right people at the right moment. So I think that more importantly, it's less about, to me, it's less about quirky ideas that are going to create a small window of media coverage. And it's more about thinking about joining up that digital journey, assuming that the product is a digital led product, or the product that can be purchased through a digital channel. It's thinking about being smart on that front versus it being on a different front. And then to me, creative always wins. So having really strong creative is in my mind, the most important thing in order to ensure that your brand and your message is powerful enough to carry through to whoever's seeing it on the other side.
Sure. Now, over the last 13 years, you've had a whole wealth of experience, especially, in many different areas around marketing. What are the top 3 books that you've made the most impact on your life, and why?
Books?
Yeah.
So I actually don't read as many books as I would like to. I would say that there's only one book that's had an impact on me when I've read it, and that's the Phil Knight Shoe Dog.
Yeah, Nike. Yeah.
Because it was such a powerful story, and at the time I read it, I was at Nike, so it had double sentiment and meaning to me.
Yeah.
And it showed a lot about tenacity and adversity, and how someone with an idea and with self-belief, no matter how often they get pushed back, can still find the ways to get that idea over the finish line. Yeah. And I just think it's a very powerful story. There's also there's another books that I've also read, which was like How to Give Zero Fucks, I think is the one. I can't remember if that's the title of it. And actually, hold on. Let me make sure I get that title right. Hold on.
Is it an orange book?
Yeah.
So Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
It's not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
So I read that while I was on holiday once, and it really gave me a lot of motivation and encouragement of thinking about things differently. And I don't know, there was just some really lovely moments in that book where you stop and you assess that piece based on your own experiences, and you think, this is what I should do. Yeah. And it to me, that book, for a very, very different reason to the Phil Knight book, were 2 things that I really enjoyed reading for different reasons.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a lot about your experiences and, the tenacity that you've read from, Phil Knight and things. Is there anything that you would tell your younger self if you could have the opportunity to do so?
That's a good question. Yes, I mean, there's loads I would have told my younger self in terms of my mentality when I was at companies in my early part of the career. I don't think I approached things. I don't think I asked enough questions to enough of the senior leadership people that I was exposed to. I don't think I did attach myself to a mentor hard enough than I should have done. I don't think I don't think I learned as much as I should have done. As in not learn, as in learn lessons. As in, I don't think early on in my career I should have done more online courses to help develop my skills better. So I should have done a digital marketing educational course. I should have learned the art of SEO and Google much better. I should have done a much better job of learning kind of business strategy and analytics. And I think if I could go back and maybe do some of that stuff earlier on in my career, I should have done it, because I think it would have helped me a lot more than it could have done in further roles that I've had.
No, I can understand that, definitely. Now, what's the vision for Adam Field? What gets you most excited about the years ahead?
I think what gets me excited is the fact that marketing is evolving, but the principles have never changed and will always remain the same, which I love, which is all around that kind of the art of the idea and thinking about the creative. So I think I'm excited that isn't changing. Being creative, which is what I've done since I was at university, but being smarter in how you use that creativity to engage with a certain audience and build relationships with them based on all these new technologies and all these new platforms that are ever kind of emerging. I'm excited to learn myself about how I apply my experience and knowledge into a space that's probably I'm as knowledgeable about as a 20-year-old. And that's what's exciting, that I can be part of that world at a time that we're just at the cutting edge of VR and AR and like I said, voice tech and I think and AI and things like that world, which is only just going to become mainstream, in the next, I think, 3 to 5 years. I'm excited about that, but while still holding on to the roots that great creative and great simple brand strategy and having clear objectives will always be at the core, no matter how quickly technology moves and how fast these platforms grow. Without that base, which I think is really important, the rest of it would be irrelevant.
Thank you, man. And finally, where can people connect with you? Social media or any website channels or email that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, my LinkedIn is a good place to kind of find me. So my LinkedIn is AdamField83, and I'm quite active on there as a platform. I love connecting with people. I love reading the stories of kind of businesses, the journeys of entrepreneurs. I love looking at new technology on that platform. So that's where I spend a lot of my time, because it allows me to engage with the people that I'm really interested in engaging with in a much easier environment. So that's probably the best place to find me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Adam, for sharing your journey, experience over the last 13 years in marketing. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we kick off?
No, all good. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much again for being on the show. Everybody else, this has been the Business Marketing Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Dow James. We'll see you next week.
This is the Business Marketing and Finance Podcast, the podcast for all your business marketing and financial needs. Get insight from experienced professionals as they delve deep into their passions and share their knowledge each week with your host, Daryl James. Like to follow or learn more? You know what to do. Hit that subscribe button now.